I was supposed to. Oh, we're recording now. Hey. Susan, I would like to hear from you. The question people always ask, always, why and when, sort of like what made you really just do the thing and write the book way back when you first started?
Way back when I first started.
Well, I don't know. How
um,
far back?
a long, long time ago, I wrote one that never got published 30 plus years ago because it was poor timing. The genre just was not being marketed at that time. But it's the story, you know. I think as writers, we all will read something or hear something, and I think, well, what if, or what made that person do that? And it's kind of like you fall in a rabbit hole, and you gotta chase it down and figure it out. So it's always the story for me.
Okay. So will you share with us, um, I guess your history of that creative process? Were you literature, English major, education wise, or did you just start writing and see what happened?
Now, it's definitely I started out majoring in history to begin with, and then I was working for a chemical company, so I had to change my major to chemistry. So they would help pay for it, and it didn't take too long to figure out I was not going to be a chemist. A lab technician, that was fine, but I was not going to be a chemist. So when I went back to school full time, I changed it to English because I knew that was my love. I'd always enjoyed writing, and thought I might be a teacher, but that didn't work out. So writing it was, and then I worked in the corporate world for a long time, over 20 years, uh, doing writing help windows. Except it's not like the pretty ones that pop up on your screen. This was for I forget what they call it now. Gosh. Um, it was real technical looking, so you had to kind of build your own little square and write in it. But at least it was writing, and I enjoyed that. And I got to write a few corporate articles that were published. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do any writing, I just got to go out and find something. So I wrote a few articles and submitted them to my church publishing house. Um, I don't remember how many I had there. And then someone here locally started a little newspaper called Youth Sports News, and it was all about little league games. So I was a reporter for a while. I went to all these little league games, and my husband went and took pictures, and then I would write up little articles about the games. It was a lot of fun, and it showed me what the life of a reporter was like. I really didn't want to do that. That was a lot of work. Um, but I heard this story, the story that led to these books, and from a fellow worker who was a Civil War reenactor. And he told me this story, and I thought, man, that's amazing. And it just kind of percolated, for a long time. And then I finally decided to dig in and do the research and get it done.
So the story you are talking about with Seeking Simon, he told you some facts there that interest you, or
No,
just
actually, I'm going back to the first book,
the first? Okay.
Rescuing Rose. That's the story. The first three embody that event, and Seeking Simon was just like I just couldn't get away from it. I just wanted to keep going.
Okay. So I feel like it's a dirty confession. I only read Seeking Simon. I
That's
didn't read the
okay.
first three. I did read Rupert's prologue, though, and I'm gonna have to finish it because I'm like, oh no, there's a girl hiding in your barn. That's may not end
Yeah.
well.
I
Except
did read
for
that
me.
one. Those are the only two, though. They're very good.
Well, I hope that they're all so that anybody could pick up any of them and not feel left out, that they could follow the story.
Yeah, I felt
Yeah.
it was fine. Like I could tell some of these Troy probably had his own book and I was like, I think there's more here, but I thought
Mhm.
it was fine. Okay, so tell us then when you started writing that first novel. I'm curious, how long of a process was that first? Well, you said you had one that wasn't published. I guess I'm always curious when people get started. Like it took me 3 years to write my first one because I didn't know what I was doing, and it just takes a long time. But
Yeah,
some
it.
whip it out.
Mhm. Well, with the first one that didn't get published, um, it took me 9 months. I always called it my fourth baby because of the length of time it took. Um, and really, with the first three in this series, kind of all came together. I started writing, and I had all these characters, and I went to a Word Weavers conference, and the lady who was a mentor for me said, "No, you got too many characters in here. You need to break it up." So that's how it became three books instead of just the one, um, which was really better for me. Um, those, so since those started that way, I was working on that in 2017 or 18. And then I kept going to the conferences and I entered some contests. And it was at the Florida Christian Writers Conference in 20, 2021, um, that I met someone who said, "Oh, you need to send this to Misty Beller," and that's how it developed. So it's hard to break it down and say it took this long to write it because it was all of these were kind of gelled together and then pulled apart like taffy.
Okay. So when you finished it, you had three solid stories,
Yeah,
more or less.
yeah.
Okay. Well, do you guys have let's talk about Seeking Simon then. Um, that poor that poor guy. It sounds like you did a lot of research on the facts of Civil War for sure. There's a lot of stuff that I had never thought about with the post-Civil War um, federal stuff going on in there.
Mhm.
Basically, they were an occupied country until they what? Until they behaved.
Yeah,
What to call? I don't know what to call that.
they had to reapply for admission. They had to apply for a readmission. Um, Tennessee was the first one to to be admitted back to the Union. Alabama kind of dragged its feet a little bit. So all of mine take place pretty much Alabama and Georgia and Tennessee. Um, so that was kind of surprising. They would hold a convention and argue and everything, and as politicians do. Um, what was really difficult was finding a lot of good concrete facts about the Freedmen's Bureau.
Mhm.
Um, I
I
found,
wondered about that. Yeah.
yeah, I found little blurbs, on the official websites, government websites, and everything. But what really helped me, and this is kind of crazy, I guess, was reading Lynn Austin's book. If I can
Hmm.
remember the name of it. Can't remember the name of it, but she had a guy who worked for the Freedmen's Bureau in Virginia,
Okay.
and so
So
that kind of gave
a
me a little.
nonfiction account.
I'm sorry,
She had a nonfiction account.
no, it's fictional,
A
fictional.
fictional. Okay.
Hmm. So I kind of used that as a little bit of a basis. And then I did find a book here at the library, um, where actually the person who was in charge of the Freedmen's Bureau in the area where Simon is located, um, he had written a book, but it seemed like it was mostly settling disputes. You know, people arguing over land and over who should live here and
That
everything.
sounds about
And
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Right.
a lot of, I think, because of the freed people didn't know how to go on with all this stuff, so they needed a lot of guidance too. So a lot of his time was spent settling disputes among the people.
Mhm. Well, because it's really awful to think about the system. You've been a slave your whole life, and now all of a sudden you're free. Now you have, unless someone is going to just be kind to you, now you no longer have a place to live. You no longer
Mhm.
have food, and you may not, no one wants to hire you, or if they do hire you, what are they going to pay you? And now you have to buy your own, like that. I imagine it for some of them, it could be worse than
Well, I
being a,
would think
Yeah,
that some people would step into because they didn't want them there and want them that, in those in being free, that
Mhm.
like the neighbor that was to not Simon but Dottie, the one that I mean, it's like they would attack or where they would do things that just you weren't safe anymore either. You weren't protected by
right.
your landowner. You really did a great job of painting just the mistrust and the um uh just that vibe, I think. But I also love the fact that you had so much hope still that kind of seemed to circle around, and I appreciated that because Civil War stuff can be really heavy to read.
Yeah, it can be.
Mhm. So
Jasper just, I wanted to just him.
yeah.
Yeah.
He was as bad as Georg in my first book. Almost. Oh,
Mhm.
mm,
all right.
Yeah.
Who really thought, I know of this is terrible. K, the guy whose name started with a K.
Kyle.
Kyle.
no.
These are spoilers. You should have read the book, but who was like, what? What? Did that
I was
surprise you?
shocked when he came back and he was alive.
Me too.
Like, where did he come
Hey,
from?
But the mix-up was good. You did a great job in
Yep. Yeah.
explaining that and how that could probably happen because records back then we didn't have computers and digital. I mean, it's like yeah. um
Right.
so do you write his story or will you write his story with how he ended up with the
Well,
Oh,
Kyle,
Kyle's story.
I,
Oh,
I hadn't thought about that.
I always
Because he
wanted to
comes,
know more about him too, Denise. I thought the same thing. Wait, who is this
Right.
guy? I kind of want to
right.
get to know him a little more,
well,
but
you could
it
just
wasn't about
see
him.
like all of a sudden he
Yeah,
has this wife and there's a little
yeah,
bit of explanation and I'm like, oh, there's
mhm,
more to that story there that you
yeah,
could totally
yeah,
use or
yeah.
incorporate. So
Yeah, that could be, especially since he was involved in the Battle of Franklin, Tennessee, and there's
Well,
that's
that'd be
a
interesting.
good rich place to draw from.
Hmm.
or you
Mhm.
could do it. What people authors do like a point five. Would that be
Yeah.
3.5?
Mhm.
It'd have to be a post one, otherwise, spoiler.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
He's
that
alive.
was, that was
You could
great.
do it as a novella as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
I bet that happened more than, I mean, more than we can imagine, where they mixed up
Yeah.
people's
Mhm.
names.
They
And
mix up things today, even with
I was
computers.
going to say, I
Yeah.
think they do, records aren't always perfect. Yeah.
Mm.
Right. I
Well,
thought that was great when he came back, and she's probably like, oh, how on earth am I going to explain the fact that I'm engaged to this guy? And oh, well, no, I'm came back to tell you that I have a wife already.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that part.
mhm.
I'll tell you, it surprised me too, because I never know what's going to happen.
Really, really deep breath and let it out really quick. It was good. Didn't last long, but it was. Had you?
Mm-hmm.
It's the thing that impressed me the most in this whole story was it takes, pardon me, it takes quite a bit for me to get on the edge of my seat anymore because I read a lot of romantic suspense. But I gotta tell you, there were times when I wanted to get up and pace the floor. I just, Jasper, oh man, that guy. I
Especially
want
because you
to,
knew what he had done before. So you were like, what's going to happen? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
I wanted to wring his neck.
Yes, for sure.
Every time he came around her, I just felt the hair going up on the back of my
Right.
neck.
Right.
Yeah, I actually
true.
had to go back and add the prologue because I felt like it wasn't coming through without the
Right.
prologue.
I think that helped. I think that it would have been confusing without that
Mhm.
to really understand.
When I first read the prologue, I was like going, I don't understand how this is going to work in when I start
Right.
going from there to the book, but then it made it make sense,
Mm-hmm.
which was
Yeah.
good.
Well,
That's
especially
like,
because you're able to tie in not just her and Jasper's situation, but even the slave
Malachi.
Malachi, who then had connections with
Right.
Simon. So that was a
Yeah.
nice.
That was cool. That was very cool.
Yeah, that was neat how that all, tied back together. That was good. You did such a good job with your characters, really tapping into the emotions
Yeah.
which I think that's what Joy's saying is, you feel those emotions and you're, about to cry when her dad's dying and, just you really, really did tap into those emotions so well. I love the Civil War history from living in Virginia and then living in Tennessee, and there's just so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't the Civil War too one where a lot of boys just they didn't make it home and the family like there's no record, like so many missing, and then they
Yeah.
might come home like a couple years later because no one was helping them get home, right? If the war
Yeah.
ended, you were set free, and then you had malaria on your way home, then you stopped off and were sick for a year, and then we're home like
Yeah. Actually, with the first three books too, that comes into play because the women who were sent north, most of them didn't make it back, and
I didn't make it back
didn't make it back home.
because they
They were
died
from
or
North Georgia, and well, some of them were assimilated into the towns where they ended up. A lot of them died.
True.
um, One woman, I couldn't. There's no way I could have put this in there, but the true story. One woman who was sent up there was gone for like 5 years. It took her 5 years to work her way back home, and when she got home, her husband was married to another woman
Ugh.
because he thought she was dead.
Right. How long do you wait?
Mhm.
Right. Well, and then the question is though, is that legitimate because she's alive? Like, but yet he's moved. I mean, it's
What would
wow.
you do?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
Like
know.
Casablanca.
Nowadays, they have to be missing what 7 years, and you declare them dead.
Yep.
How many years is it?
Wow.
I have an author question. Hopefully, I'm not stealing from Tasha's
No, no.
questions.
Go ahead.
Go ahead and steal. Are you a plotter? Do you plot out? No, me either.
No,
So
I have tried
here's
it,
my
and I
other
just
question.
can't do it.
Yeah,
Nice to hear that.
me too. I've tried and it's painful to try
Mhm.
and plot. But with the series, and this is book, you have 5 books in the series,
Yeah,
correct? Okay.
yeah.
So I mean, how do you keep your momentum going? Does that make sense? I know that you pick a different set of characters for each one. So does that help, you think, instead of just following one set through the whole thing?
Yeah, it worked for me. One reason I think I picked true events is because that gives me some parameters.
Right, right,
Something like this has to happen, around this time. So it keeps
right.
me it keeps me in a boundary. Um, it was a little bit more difficult with starting with Seeking Simon because now I've got a lot more freedom to do whatever. So I'm trying to learn to plan ahead a little bit, but it's really hard. Sometimes I sit down to the computer and I have no idea how I'm going to work through this.
Yeah.
I was telling my grandson he wants to be a writer too. He's 15, and I told him the other day. I said, how am I going to kill off this character? I got to kill off this character. you know? And of
That's
course, he
funny.
has all these wonderful sci-fi kind of things, which don't work.
How old is he?
15.
15. That's what I thought you said.
That's
Yeah, they do at
awesome.
that age, don't they?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Our grandson is just about to turn 17, and yeah, he has wild ideas.
Mhm.
So what, okay, I was gonna move topics, but we're not. We're gonna keep talking about Seek and Simon here for a little bit. As you were writing it, I want to hear what was some of your did you have favorite passages where you just were excited to write a scene? Like, I don't want you to pick your favorite baby here. Like, we love it all.
Yeah.
But I know when I'm writing, there's one scene that I'm like, yes, this is my.
Yeah,
So talk to us about that a little bit.
definitely. For some reason, the scenes where I have the men together are the most fun for me to write. I don't know why. That was true in Loving Lydia. I had a couple of scenes of the men together, playing cards and stuff. But my favorite scene in Seeking Simon is when Simon and Lionel fight. When
Yeah.
they finally duke it out, they finally get it out loud.
Because
But
that's
I'm not good
you
with
guys
fight
are.
scenes, so I have to really stretch myself to write, figure out, well, if they punch here and then what happens. So,
Mhm.
but
Well,
it was fun.
I thought you did well with that though, because from what I remember, you didn't have a play-by-play fight, punch, but there was some internal of Simon saying, okay, I see what's happening here. He's got to get the steam off. I'm gonna let him hit me. I know he's not trying to kill me.
Mhm.
Fight as brothers and not enemies. And I felt that.
Good. Thank you.
Um, and I liked it because I read a lot of historical romance that it seems like they've put uh, the mindset of the 21st century into a dress, and you're on a wagon and they're mouthing off to their boyfriend or whatever, and it's like an 1800s girl would not have said that. Like, she wouldn't have. And I like how you had some of that. Like, fighting is okay then. It wouldn't be so okay now, I don't think.
Mhm.
If my husband started fighting another man, mm-mm.
Then he's going to have to fight you, right?
I
I
don't know.
think that,
I don't think he's punched anyone ever in his whole life.
well, I think it's interesting too how much Simon's body, he struggled with so many different things, yet the inner strength that he did to push himself to step up and be the man and, and do what was responsible and all of that was really nice to read, just something that I enjoyed in his character.
Mhm.
I think when he had the scene with his father, and his father explained what the girl had actually been trying to instigate, I thought that was such a healing scene for the
Very much
father
so.
and son. I love the way you wrote that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
How often, or in your research, did you find that in families they fought each, different family members or different boys fought for different sides? They were split like that.
Um, I probably not so much in immediate families, but there were pockets of Union sympathizers all over the South. That surprised me.
That's
I
very
knew
surprising.
there was like in Missouri and places like that, but in Alabama and Georgia,
Yeah.
it was very surprising.
Okay. That's very surprising.
So a lot of them
Mhm.
were just, they weren't verbal about it, but the family knew, like, oh, cousin so and so is not really a sympathizer or something like that. But there weren't a lot of like verbal, I don't know how to explain it, outward signs to the
They
people around
they
them.
kind of went under the radar kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And managing Millie, actually, Troy
Yeah.
travels around trying to avoid the conscription.
I
He
remember
he,
that.
he doesn't want to fight at all. Uh,
Mhm.
and and then finally, to avoid the conscription, he lets the Union Army catch him.
Mm-hmm.
So
Spoiler. It was
yeah,
so fun reading Sinking Simon because I remembered your characters from the other books, and I'm like, oh, it was like meeting people I hadn't seen for a while.
right, right.
I really
That's
enjoyed
the
that.
way I feel when I read a series. I'm so glad to see the former characters.
Mhm.
Yeah.
When you give us the little reunion at the end, even
Yeah.
if it was
Mhm.
a funeral. Or I guess was that the preview? I kept reading. Is the
The,
funeral
the the
prologue,
funeral is a preview for redeeming Rupert.
but they had a Thanksgiving prayer.
Right.
That
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah. They
okay.
did. Yeah, yeah.
And I thought it was interesting too because at that time Thanksgiving wasn't set as the third. Is it the third or fourth Thursday of November? I know
Thursday,
you.
right?
Or
Well, I
what
just
was it?
Thursday
It
after the
showing.
moved
first
around,
one.
I believe, for
Yeah.
a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that year, actually, President Johnson did move it to December.
Interesting.
Yeah, I figured that was a historical thing, so that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've always told people everything I know about history I learned from a romance novel.
Yeah.
That's
I was
why
like,
that's
oh,
why we got to get our facts straight, right?
Exactly. My daughter
We're
says
teaching.
if we'd had this instead of history class, I would have loved it.
I
Yeah.
know, right?
I had no use for history in school, and now when you're having to do research to write
Right.
historical stuff, it's a whole
Right.
different ballgame.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the
Always.
older we get, the more we probably treasure it, especially our personal history, like Erin writing about her family, it just means a lot to us.
Mhm.
Yeah. And the younger people don't realize it until they read some of it. If you can get them to finally read some of it,
Mhm.
then they're interested. But it's
Mhm.
like, I don't know. I didn't know that person. But it's like, yeah, but you you want to know why you're like you are.
Right. Guess
No,
where it
Mhm.
came from.
there's some DNA in there. No, I'm just kidding. But
It's
they're
true
like,
though.
oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I'm sure I missed this on your bio. Susan, where do you live?
In Columbus, Georgia.
You are in
I
Georgia.
I Columbus is on the Alabama line. So that's why I have a lot about
Mhm.
Georgia and Alabama because
Mhm.
I know a lot about both of them. Um, and actually I'm an hour north of Andersonville. I have visited Andersonville a couple of times. Very, very sobering. I started to have Simon in prison there, and I thought, no, that's too close to home. So
Mhm.
that's why I had him in prison in Virginia.
Well, because he needed to make the long
Yeah,
trek
yeah,
back.
he needed to make that long trip.
He had to get to Georgia.
Yeah.
How do we get into Georgia? So Andersonville is where one of the prisons were. Is that what you
Yeah.
were? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a Confederate prison, and it only existed for about a year.
Mhm.
But it was horrible. It was just awful. Libby was awful too. Libby
Mhm.
was they were totally different. I've been thinking about this lately. Libby was in a old warehouse, a big warehouse,
Wow.
and so all the prisoners were inside. In Andersonville, they're all outside, which is you think,
Mhm.
well, that's kind of nice. They're outside, but
No protection from the elements.
Yeah.
yeah, it gets really um, yucky. Because of they have no resources really, and
Mm.
that's where our term deadline comes from. I don't know if that's a surprise to all of you. There it was a true deadline. If they crossed this line, they were dead.
Wow, I've never
So
heard
that's
that.
that's where our term deadline comes from.
Mm.
I noticed too that you included the part about Texas not knowing the war was over yet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
that was like, oh, I know that.
Well, where I live, Columbus, that we have a sign that says this is the last land battle of the Civil War, which it wasn't really, but we didn't know it for a long time.
Right.
Uh,
I actually volunteer at the Naval Museum. We have a Civil War Naval Museum here, and I don't know if I've shared that with you all. That is fascinating, and I have access to their archives now. So
Oh, that's cool.
hopefully, there's going to be some more stories coming from that.
That's awesome.
yeah.
It's
So
really
so tell
neat.
us what's next for you? Are you just continuing this series? Do you have other books out there that are different?
No, no, I did a few little manuals. I don't know. I have I'm in a caroling group at Christmas time, and
Okay.
that's my heart. Um, so I had written some little manuals about how to start a caroling group. I self-published those.
Mhm.
But what I'm working on right now is I'm thinking of it as bookends because I feel like I need to sort of explain as how Troy, you read it, where he has a different father. So I'm doing a prequel for that about
Good.
how.
Because that was a curiosity that kind of came out of nowhere, and I'm going, oh, that's
Oh,
interesting.
okay.
I wonder what the
Yeah,
story is there. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm doing that, and then I'm doing one that's a little bit farther after the war. They're novellas. They're not going to be really long. So
That's what you say right now. We'll see.
I know
That goes for you.
it's like I said in one of the times when I reported my word count, I said, I don't know how long this is going to be. And Joy
I'm
said, yeah, they just keep going
I'm
sometimes.
curious. Can we have a show of hands? Who has tried to write a novella and it turned into a novel? Is there anyone else? Looky there. Looky there. So you've been
Well,
warned.
then,
I can't.
I have one that I have to turn into my publisher now, and it comes out in the fall. And it could easily be put into a big book. It's probably bigger than what it should be. It's like, yeah, because we like the depth, right, of the character
yeah,
development and all of that. And you just can't don't have the time to go into that. So it's funny
right.
you asked that.
People need to know. They need to know all the things.
All the things.
Yeah, yeah.
They
Lots
want
of
to
times
know.
when I
That's
read
the
a
thing.
novella, I feel like I'm missing something.
Right.
Mhm.
They didn't give me enough.
Right.
All the things.
Every time, every time I try to write a short story, thinking it'll be a freebie for a newsletter, it never happens. I cannot write short.
Just turns
It's
into
Mm.
challenging. It's very I didn't think I could do it either. Um, I've written one novella, one story that was like it was for contests, and I didn't win, but I didn't care because I wanted to use it as a, like you said, as a reader magnet. Um,
Yeah.
and I think it's 1,500 words. And I mean, I scraped in there at 14.99. I was just like
Wow.
cutting the last few words. It's very challenging to get down that low, but I think it's a good practice. I think it is.
Yeah.
I have it's something I'd want to do, and I've struggled with how to do it because
Yeah. I have a novella because an agent told me that if any of you read it, some of you have here, um, to cut all these chapters out of my novel, Muldoon's Misfortunes. And I was like, no, I like it. And she said, it's okay. Use it somewhere else and then develop it. And so that ended up being the novel because it was actually a true story that I cut out in Muldoon's, but it had nothing to do with me. That relationship wasn't part of my family. So it was, I was, then I had to add to it because it was only about 4 chapters and then I had to add. So I was kind of glad that it was short, but I can see what you guys are saying because you want to go deeper. You want to have more things happen. You want people to know them better, and doing it in a novella form. Sometimes you're like, is this too shallow? It's not really,
It's
what's
a
the purpose?
For sure. It's a pacing thing. Absolutely. But you know what? Susan can do it if she wants to do it.
You can do it.
Oh,
To
no.
bring it back to you, Susan, as you are studying the history, you're reading the archives, you have this Civil War stuff you want to get out. Um, how do you balance that with storytelling, right? You have your history, but you also know these characters you've made up in your head. How do you balance that in your mind, or does it just sort of flow for you?
I've never thought about that question. I always want to tie it to something real, something that really happened.
The history
The
timeline, you mean?
history part, yeah. So
Mhm.
that I look at all these people who write westerns, and I think, oh, they're great, and I enjoy reading them, but it doesn't give me enough guidelines. It's too
Right.
free for me.
Which is interesting. So with my historical, I didn't want to mess it up. And so I was like, I want it as close to technology before any technology, but I don't want to mess with any wars because I don't want to
Yeah.
mess it up. And I was like, 1879, we're past the Civil War, but we don't have the telephone yet. And so I think I took the easy way out. But with that same idea, with being a Christian writer, did you have intentional themes you wanted your readers to feel, or did that sort of just come out as you were writing?
That really just comes out. Most of my characters, you can tell, kind of have something of a Christian background, and I try to bring it out with their repeating scripture, remembering scripture. That's, I guess, because I had such a good basis myself of memorizing scripture that I feel like if you grow up with that, it just never leaves you. And so, according to whatever the scripture is, of course, with Seeking Simon, it's, a man can plan his ways, but God guides his steps. And and when I wrote that, this was from the Lord. When I wrote that every prodigal runs out of road sooner or later, that's just like, oh Lord, that's what you gave that to me for. It's for prodigals, and we all have some in our families and our loved ones around it, and just to kind of keep holding on and pray that the Lord will bring them back.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Have you had any readers respond? Um, we've all had readers respond, but have you felt like the words that God helps you write as a Christian writer? I know all of you at times you write this and you're like, this is not from me, this is from God.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't even realize it until a reader responds and says, that's exactly what I needed. Have you had
Yeah.
any of those experiences with readers?
Yeah, actually, in um, the most recent one I can think of is in Redeeming Rupert. One of the readers pulled out, and I showed you guys this thing that I did. This is the quote from Malachi, and when I wrote it, it didn't really resonate with me, but a reader said, "Oh, that just really stuck out to me." And so
Yeah.
I thought, well, if it stuck out to her, maybe it's worth pulling out for somebody else too.
Will you read that for us again?
Yes, you can't let fear of loss keep you from going forward.
Mhm.
You got to feed your soul with hope and trust God to give you a good harvest.
Yeah. You ever feel like when you write it, you're like, who said that? That's good.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's nice to go back and read some of your old stuff, and think, oh, that's pretty good. Because we tend to get down on ourselves
Right.
and, think,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
so great.
Knowing what you know about all that history, would you like to live anywhere? But I mean, not like in a real scary place, but are you intrigued enough that you'd like to go?
In the past,
Yeah, where would you go?
um, I would probably go to Victorian England, actually. Um,
Is it safer there?
I read a lot of Regency romance, or I used to, not anymore. But I always loved that period. And with our caroling group, we dress in Victorian costume,
Right.
Okay.
and we only sing the traditional songs that they would have sung then. And
Wow.
so it's fun to take on that persona, So I guess that's where I would go.
That's fun. Um, are there any questions you wish we had asked that you want to answer that we didn't ask? I obviously did not do my homework.
Obviously, no. Let me off the hook. I told my husband, I said, you might want to leave because it's going to be, we're going to be talking all the time.
We do. We're good at words.
Yeah.
I have a question. I was looking at the questions that Lee gave us at first when we first started this. And one is, what's the most surprising thing you learned while writing your books, like all of your books? What surprised you the most?
Well, I mentioned about having all the northern sympathizers in the South.
Yeah.
That was one thing. Guys, I grew up in the civil rights movement.
Mm.
So I know a little bit about the tension that goes on there. But my grandparents, I go back to my grandparents, they always taught me to judge people by their character and to, treat everybody fairly. And I feel like that comes through in my writing. That's why I try to have the family that has slaves, but they treat them good.
Mhm.
Um, and some people may think that's not realistic, but
I think there were
it,
families like that. I do.
I hope so, and I hope mine was one of them because when you realize that there were, it's like only 3% of the South even had slaves. It
Oh,
was,
Really?
yeah, yeah, very few people had slaves, just those that had big plantations. Um, and in the cotton mills, um, from what I read, of course the the white people were poor and they worked alongside the black people there. They may have been slaves, but they didn't own them. They were slaves from the people who owned the mills and everything. And I just feel like, especially women, I think we bond together and hold each other up. Um, I hope we do as Christians, especially, but even as women, because we empathize with each other.
Mhm.
So I guess that was the few people that owned slave. That was kind of a surprising thing. I don't know
I
if I
grew
can
up
think
in
of
the
anything else.
north, and I think that's interesting that you say that. I grew up in the north. Most my family roots were in Chicago, but and you didn't have the same kind of prejudice that you had down here, but it did exist. I mean, it
Yeah,
did. I remember my grandmother saying over and over, she said, I always have to look at those situations and say, how would I feel if my skin was if God made my skin black or
yeah,
dark? She'd say dark because we
yeah,
didn't say black back then. But how would I feel and how would I want to be treated? And that's how you have to think about it.
yeah. And
Mhm.
I went to all segregated schools all through school till I got to college. And honestly, I felt like I was cheated. I felt like that that I didn't get to experience some of the world that I should have experienced, that was around me.
Mhm.
Um, and if you have you read Eugenia Price?
Yes.
Anybody read Eugenia Price?
Mhm.
She kind of had that same sentiment in some of her books, that you grow up with these people and their family. You know, yes, there's a difference, but in a way, they're family.
Mhm.
So um, I may get called out on the carpet for not being realistic. My friend who writes Civil War, he writes a lot about the Navy and all. He does really good with with his showing the disparity. He shows a lot of
Mhm.
animosity, between
But
the races.
I think in at least in Seeking Simon, you were showing a whole thread of forgiveness and redemption
Mhm.
that I thought that you tied it up so well, letting us see Malachi at the end and letting Simon see Pansy again and
Hmm.
finding out the truth of what
Yeah,
happened, you know. Um, yeah, I mean, I think it was Lynn or Denise that said a little while ago that time period is hard. It's heavy. It is nowadays too. I don't know that
hmm,
we've come that far, unfortunately, but
No, I don't know that
um,
we've come any farther from
yeah.
hmm.
that. So
So we're
it just
still dealing with
changes.
the
It just
same.
looks a little different, but it's the
We
same.
just call it different stuff now.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But you did a really good job showing, like you were talking about, family and caring about other people just because of their character, just because of who they were, how you were, lived with them.
Thank you.
That's what surprised me about all your stories, Susan, is the time period you're writing in was so dark and just devastating in so many
Mhm.
ways to so many people for so many different reasons. And then, but you always bring a warmth into the storyline that is like palpable. I can always feel it when I'm reading. There's this warmth in the situation, even though they're all dealing with so many aspects of the Civil War. The way you write it, the family feels like very close knit and like they're all trying to help each other without you saying, I need to help them. It's just the way you write it. The
Yeah.
whole core of the story is how the relationships in families and what that could have been like, even with the North and South being mixed into an immediate family.
Hmm.
You still keep your the warmth in the story that just feels so good to read. And then I learned too, because I'm from California, we didn't I don't recall anything. And then my family was upper Midwest, so nobody came from that region, and so there
Right.
were no stories, no family stories. And so when I read yours, it's like I'm reading family stories, like what
Hmm.
people could pass down to their relations
Right.
later. And that's what it feels like to me.
Do
Mhm.
you
Well,
feel like too, Erin, that, and she's doing that, it's like this is how how I feel about my characters, and I think I'm drawing the same thing from Susan, is even when you're in these situations that societal pressures and whatever are placing a lot of burden and a lot of challenges on the characters, they're still family. They still love each other and they still care about each other. And you can't just erase that because you have disagreements. We have disagreements in our family, I mean, political disagreements. I think probably everybody does.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make you not like the person, not care about the person, and not willing to help them and not willing to try to, you know, make everything toward a good goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're in Georgia. Have you always been there? Do you have generations there?
Yeah, my family's mostly Georgia and Alabama. My dad used to tease. He said Georgia was settled by debtors, and it's still full of debtors. uh, yeah, I went to school in Tennessee, and yeah, pretty much just the southeast. That's my family. I tried to throw. I didn't know if how well I did the Scottish thing in Seeking Simon. But that was probably because I had just come from our trip to Ireland and Scotland,
Right.
and so I thought, well, maybe I don't know if I should throw this in there or not, but it was fun. So,
It was good. How would you pronounce her name? I tried to pronounce it in my head. I'm not sure I did
I
it right.
pronounce it Daviana. Daviana. So
Dara.
it's
That's Dara
Davi,
Daviana.
Dottie, Davi. So
So pretty.
it was it was really hard trying to find that, and I love the her first name, but I couldn't get. I knew people wouldn't like the pronunciation,
Ellen
so
would have
it's
been
just
tough to come up with something, yeah.
yeah.
How do you pronounce the first name?
It's Dara.
It's Dara.
I thought it would be Dara, but it was more like Sarah. That's what I had to put in my brain. It sounds like Sarah, so it's not going to work with Dottie.
Right.
Well, before we log off, I imagine all sorts of readers are going to watch this video. Tell them where they can best find you and stay in touch with you. Newsletter, website, Instagram, where are you?
Okay, well, I'm everywhere. um, my website is Susan P. Sloan at .com, SusanPSloan.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Threads. I don't do too much on Threads. I don't understand it. So I'm either Susan Sloan, SP Sloan, or Susan P. Sloan. I have to keep my maiden name in there because there is another Susan Sloan who writes stuff that's not Christian.
It's funny that I have to do the same thing, so that's really
Same
funny.
here.
I'm sure a lot of us do. It's like, oh, I want to be sure that they know that's not me.
Okay. I have there's an Anne Hackett on Amazon. We are not the same. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me pray for you and your writing before we log off. Lord, I ask that you will just bless Susan with the talent and skill to write stories that hook readers and want them to stick around for the rest of it, that you would put your words in her mouth, that she would be a scribe for your kingdom. Thank you for the work that she's been able to do and the encouragement that readers are able to take from her stories that give us hope, that show us even in hard times, you are working. So I ask that you will bless her work and her writing, and that you will just put people in her path that will support her in this endeavor. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Who is our May author?
Yeah, who's next?
Let's see.
Lee.
Lee? Oh,
I am.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's Lee.
Okay, so Lee is next.
Mhm.
I'm not hosting.
And Karen
Karen's
is
hosting.
the moderator.
I'm hosting.
Yeah.
Yep.
Karen's moderator. Yeah.
Each month I will feature whoever the author is, that I'll feature their book in my newsletter.
Me too.
That
That's what I've been
helps me a
doing.
lot because I have something
Right.
to share.
Exactly.
I will unfortunately miss all of you next month because we'll be on a plane flying to London
Oh, really?
at
Come
the same
on.
time that you guys will be meeting. My son has been traveling abroad this semester, so we are going out to celebrate our anniversary and pick him up and bring him home. But my novella, it comes out in the fall, has a Scottish hero, and so we're going to Scotland. So I'm like, yay!
Cool.
So
Dress
that'll be
warm. I
fun.
don't care if it's summertime. Dress warm.
Really? Okay, that's good to know because I haven't gotten that
Yes.
far to figure out what to pack. But Lee, I didn't mean to take away from your
No,
thing, but
at
I
least
won't be
take a
here. So
sweater for the evenings. Yeah.
okay,
Because when we
good to
went in
know.
August, yeah, it gets cool in the
All
evening.
right. How many of y'all have been to Scotland? Really? And Denise is going to go,
I'm
wow.
going to go.
That's my
We
bucket
went in
list.
June and it was cold.
Okay.
Wow.
Well, then we're going May, June. So yep. Cool.
Layer, Denise, layer.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yep.
That's what I'm hearing, what I think I'm hearing them say.
I know. I'm not a great packer, and we're going for 3 weeks, so it's like, oh, we need
Take care of
to
it.
figure that out. So
Mhm.
Well, you ladies can keep chatting. I'm gonna log off now. It was so great to get to hear about your book, Susan.